Good evening, everybody. Good evening. I'm the Mayor of Worcester, and this is a public meeting, and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording, and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note, this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend the public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. We will now have a minute silence in memory of Councillor Andy Roberts. Would you like to please stand and join me for 1 minute's silence? Please be seated. I've now turned to the City Orator.
Good evening, everyone. Today, I am talking about the concept of acknowledgement. Streaming clouds of the air are switching bespoke hats, coordinating with the changing of seasons and fledgling ways. Motions play crusting chess pieces. We're clicking the refresh button with a youthful eagerness and jolliness that approaches us. Taking the firm of fearlessness, refurbishment out of our dehydrated mouths because we long for rawness and authenticity. We pride our melodies with it. No changes can take a comfy seat without the undertaking of acknowledgement for our responsibilities and our actions that we pin to ruckled hats and belts. Actions issued by the brain and palms and sailing swimming pool floats of judgment. We can be a collective union of decency if we choose to acknowledge it. In one time or another, a sturdy final bed will be settled for each of us. Underneath, the principles we wore as undercover badges. Work towards making them shiny with the respect and love that you should aim to show others and yourselves. When we gaze upon a nebulous mirror, it's not just ourselves that we see, but every action and word promoted and shared by a moral fidget spinner. Our pulses have many avenues. Thank you.
Thank you, Rihanna. I'd like to just first of all, to warmly welcome Councillor Wilmore. Welcome to the Guildhall. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Are there any apologies?
Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Round, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. And are there any declarations of interest?
I just need to declare a personal interest in relation to the violence against women motion. Because of my professional work, it's not appropriate for me to take part in a political debate or vote on that matter, so I'll just leave the room during that.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is the minutes. Can we agree that these minutes are a true and accurate record? Neil, have you got an issue with the minutes?
Bear with me, Councillor. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I wasn't at the meeting, I was away, but I wonder whether on page 2, item 3, a quotation mark could be placed before the word divisive and after the word untruths, because otherwise that appears to be a statement on behalf of this council, which I would resent deeply. So I think the quotation marks would mean a lot if they were included.
She expressed the view that
It's regarding the pride flag.
In this case, Neil, I don't think that's going to be, I think we're going to keep the minutes as they are, because she made that as her statement. So there wasn't a question mark, she was making that as a statement. So as much as you might not like it, I'm afraid that's the minutes. Thank you. Right. Are there any matters arising? No? Okay. So, okay, so we're at the Mayor's communications. First of all, I'd like to make my own tribute to Andy Roberts. Andy represented Warndon Parish South for 17 years and obviously was elected way back in 2006. He was a deputy mayor and then a mayor, and he spent 4 years as a cabinet member, holding a number of portfolios, including performance and innovation, efficiency, delivering value for money, and clean and green safe city. He also served as chair of licensing committee and audit committee and vice chair of standards committee. And he showed a great interest in local history. As many will know, Andy spent 37 years working for Hereford and Worcester Fire Service. He also served as the county councillor and was a linchpin of the local Worcester Conservatives. He will be missed by very many people, friends and family, and local residents living in the Warndon villages, and will be missed by many. Okay, we'll have tributes. Is that done now? Yeah. So I'm going to invite the group leaders to say a few words if they wish, and anyone else. I'm going to turn, I think, to the Conservative group first. Would you like to say something for Andy?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. It was my privilege to know Andy Roberts, yes, as a valued colleague whose wisdom and insight seemingly knew no bounds, but more importantly for me, as a personal friend. On those many occasions when Andy and I shared a drink away from committees and the public domain, I always found him full of gentle humour, willing to listen, and having listened, he would guide me back to the path of common sense. With such a deft touch, I invariably felt I'd been there from the beginning of the conversation, which was rarely the case. It became apparent that Andy was enormously well read. He and I shared a passion for history. He had a connection to and a deep understanding of the landscape of our great city and county. However, there is one thing that will remain with me. Andy's empathy with and commitment to the underdog, those whose voice is rarely heard but needs to be. Andy was a tireless advocate for vulnerable young people whose lives are shaped even before they move beyond infancy. Those children had an indefatigable champion in Councillor Andy Roberts, and Fran, his wife, and his family will be rightly proud of his many achievements in this field and in many others. Those many hundreds of people who filled the cathedral to remember the life of a dedicated public service servant were not there because they had to be. They were there because they wanted to be. On behalf of the underdog, Andy, thank you.
Thank you, James. Turn to Councillor Denham.
Thank you. On behalf of the Labour Group, I'd like to offer our condolences on the sad passing of Councillor Roberts. Andy's life was one of public service to the end. He dedicated his life to helping others. As a firefighter, putting his own life at risk to help others. His rise up the ranks of Herefordshire and Worcestershire Fire Service to become Assistant Chief Fire Officer is testament to his talent and dedication and his ability to get on with people. He was a Worcester man who knew his council patch and his brief inside out. Andy represented Warndon villages at every level of local government. He was clearly loved and respected by so many residents. They voted for a man who exemplified all the principles of public service, irrespective of politics. He listened to everyone, providing his hearing aids were properly tuned in, and spoke up for them and acted on people's concerns. He leaves a unique gap in Worcestershire and city life. May he rest in peace.
Councillor Bissett.
Thank you. I didn't know Andy Roberts for very long because I've only been on the council for just over 4 years, whereas he was on the council for much longer. Not only this council, but the county council as well, where he worked really hard, a very dedicated public servant. He was a champion of children and young people, dedicated to his patch, Warndon Parish, and his residents. There's most definitely in Warndon Parish an Andy Roberts fan club. I will always remember a planning committee where he came to speak against a planning application which was in contravention of the South Worcestershire Development Plan as it was then. He wanted to preserve the green space for the people of Warndon Parish, and I respect him very much for that. He was an environmentalist in many ways, really keen on nature, worked with the Worcestershire Environmental Group a great deal. The sympathy of all members of Worcester Green Party, and certainly all the members here, goes out to his family and friends.
Thank you. Councillor Alcott.
Mayor, thank you. Yeah, I would like to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group and also as a city and a county councillor. It was a genuine privilege to work with Andy. It's very difficult in politics, and I remember when we put through our first budget amendment, which I won't bore you all with, but Andy was the only councillor who stood up for me despite being opposition and saying, I don't believe Councillor Alcott was doing this for political reasons. And I could have literally run across the council chamber and hugged him for that. But he was just, and he wasn't always political, but he always had sort of his best intentions at heart. And so it was just a genuine pleasure to work with him. I know at County he did a lot of work with children's services. And at City here, I was lucky, I was chair of standards last year, and my first option was, they said, who would you like? I was pleased going to have Andy as vice chair. And I know Karen hasn't had such a chance to work with him, but I would just like to say, yeah, he's just very valued, and he wasn't always political, and he always did his best, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, as a Warndon Parish Councillor, and Morden City Council from the area. I've known Andy Roberts for quite a long time, even before he was involved in Warndon Villages, when he was originally a county councillor in Claines. He then became a city councillor in 2006, where he remained on the city council until his sad and premature death. He then took over Martin Clark as involved in Worcestershire County Council, and he made a return to that, and what a return he made. And I think the fact that the county's children's services were turned around is a testament to his hard work. But I want to more talk about Andy on the sort of the non-political side of it, and that in terms he was so well known in his patch. If he went shopping at Tesco, it was basically like a surgery, because he would be approached by 2 or 3 people when he did his shopping, and he would come out with a few cases to follow up, which he did. His casework was absolutely phenomenal. He was also a big fan of our dachshund Henry, and when Lucy used to come round to Andy's house with Henry used to like attacking Fran's slippers, and once Andy got his smartphone out and filmed Henry attacking Fran's slippers, and he put it onto Facebook. And I certainly remember going to watch rugby a few times with him when Lucy couldn't win the game. And he was also a good rugby player as well, and he actually played for Worcester Rugby Club in his youth as well. So he was a very remarkable man. I'm proud to have known him, and of course it was such a shock. He's no longer with us.
Thank you. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Although my time on the council has been short, I did know Andy a little through my visits to the parish council, as well as through my campaigning. When I first started to campaign in Warndon Parish North, residents told me that I was going to have a very difficult job, because there was a very good county councillor who I would never beat. And well, I never got the opportunity, and I'm sorry that that's the case, but I really liked Andy. He was very supportive of me. He acknowledged my hard work on social media, which I was very grateful for. I thought that was magnanimous of him. And he will be greatly missed by residents. You know, they are constantly saying how much they respected and supported him. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? No? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, continuing with the Mayor's communications. It's been quite an eventful several weeks and months. I think the schedule for the Mayor's commitments has really ramped up very quickly after COVID. So recent highlights have been obviously things like the Worcester Show, the Drumhead Parade by the Battle of Worcester Society. Recently, I was part of the degree ceremonies for the university and Heart of Worcester College. We had a fantastic heritage weekend here in Worcester, and lots of tours of the Guildhall. We had an evensong cathedral service for the retiring of the Dean of Worcester. And of course, quite recently, we've had the Worcester City Run. So there's a number of things where the city is very, very busy, and it's good to see our community thriving with many, many events. I'd like to just point out 2 events that are coming up that I'd really like your support on, sort of helping to publicise, really. The first one is the Worcester Civic Society lecture. It's billed as a light-hearted talk about the canals of Worcester. It's at 7 o'clock, Tuesday the 10th of October. It's free to enter and take part, but there is a retiring collection for my charity, Age UK. So if you're on social media, could you help me and try to spread the word, please, for a good cause. Thank you. And the other event that I'd like to give a little plug for, it's a little way away, is the Elgar Chorale Christmas Carol service here in the Guildhall. It's a very good, smallish choir that does some fantastic music. Again, it's a fundraiser for the Mayor's charity, and I think it's really important that, and I hope that you'll join me in supporting the Mayor's charity and these mayoral events. Whatever political party you may be, I think it's really important that we support the Mayor of the day, and I hope you'll join me with that. So the last thing to say is that at the end of the meeting, please will you join me for some refreshments in the Mayor's Parlour. Okay, right, so moving on with the agenda, the next item is public participation. And we have 3 members of the public. And the first person is Alex Shepherd, and I think you have 4 minutes, isn't it? 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes, and we'll time you. And we'll give you a little nod when it gets close to the time, okay?
Good evening, I'm Alex Shepherd and I'm speaking on the issue of pets as prizes. This is live animals being given on council land as prizes at fairgrounds and such. And we're resolving that the Place and Economic Development Committee should consider banning this practice outright, which is the giving of live animals as prizes in any form on Worcester City Council land, and also working out how this ban can be publicised and enforced to ensure maximum effect. Basically, the giving of live animals as prizes goes against kind of animal welfare and other considerations, as having an animal should be something that is considered before, receiving one as a prize at a fairground. It should be a big, heavy choice to gain a pet for your household. And also the animals that are kept at the fairgrounds, they usually are under a high amount of stress because it's too warm or it's too cold, and they're at the fairground for 9+ hours, which for a goldfish in a bag kind of gets to the kind of limit of what they can endure. So basically the long and short of it is that on the grounds of animal welfare, I think it's unethical for animals to be given as prizes at fairgrounds, and I'm hoping that this is agreed upon by everyone else today. Thank you. That's all I have to say on that matter.
Participation is from Craig Wellersby. Again, you have 5 minutes, and we'll start when you're ready, so no rush.
Worcester prides itself on being one of the more forward-thinking cities in the UK, putting sustainability at the heart of governance. However, this awareness needs to include every aspect of council activities, including the provision of food. The science is now clear that meat and dairy are major contributors to the climate and ecological emergencies. And research tells us that switching to a plant-based diet is one of the most effective things an individual can do to reduce their impact on the planet. But a plant-based diet isn't just good for the planet, it has individual health benefits too. By lowering blood cholesterol and promoting a healthy body weight, research indicates that a plant-based diet can reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease, currently the leading cause of death globally. Studies have also shown that low meat eaters are significantly less likely to develop diabetes or bowel cancer. Now, I know some of you are rightly concerned about food poverty and the fact that there are households here in Worcester that can't feed their own children. This is tragic when we have the resources nationally to deliver affordable, healthy food for all. Unfortunately, we're locked into a food system that isn't fit for purpose. with 40% of the UK's most productive agricultural land currently used to grow food for livestock. The inefficiency of this system is obvious. As a country, we can promote, as a county, and as a country, we can promote local, sustainably grown produce and encourage food sharing. But if we don't tackle the root cause of food poverty, it will become pervasive. However, it's not always easy for individuals to change their diets when surrounded by menus heavily biased towards meat and dairy options. This council has the opportunity, and I think the duty, to simply prioritise plant-based food options wherever they can, treating the climate and ecological emergencies with the urgency they require. In the news recently, more than 650 academics called on British universities to commit to 100% plant-based catering on campuses to fight the climate emergency. Meanwhile, central government is facing a legal challenge regarding its failure to introduce measures to reduce meat and dairy in its own food strategy. It is ignoring the insistence of its own advisors that a predominantly plant-based food system must be the goal and should be the default option in all public sector catering. Many other councils around the country have already passed motions which raise awareness of the benefits of eating less meat and dairy products, and have voted to lead by example by ensuring that all food provided at internal events is plant-based. Even if this only applies to refreshments at a small number of events per year, it sends a powerful message and helps to normalise plant-based eating. In the midst of a climate and ecological emergency, supporting a move towards healthy, plant-based diets for Worcester citizens is a logical and, I would say, necessary next step. So the question is, will councillors meet with me to address any concerns they may have over the cost, inclusivity and local impacts of such a policy, and hear how it could be an enormous win for health, sustainability and budget? Thank you.
Thank you. That is a question, and as it's not directed at one person individually, I'm probably going to look at the group leaders to take you up on those offers if they choose to do so. So looking at the group leaders in the room. So thank you very much for speaking and asking the question. Thank you. Great. Right. The next public participation is Joyce Griffiths.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to speak in support of Councillor Murray's motion, item number 7 on the agenda. I'm Joy Griffiths, Chair of the Trustee Board at West Mercia Rape and Sexual Abuse Support Centre, or RASAC as it's known. It's very encouraging to see Council acknowledging the harm and impact of violence against women and girls and supporting the White Ribbon campaign. The comments highlighting the root causes of violence against women and girls are indeed based in misogyny, the fact that we live in a patriarchal society and with power and control. I would like to draw councillors' attention to the prevalence and impact of sexual violence outside of the domestic abuse setting. Whilst there is no denying that there will be rape, abuse and harassment within relationships, it is much wider than that. In 2022-23, we received over 3,000 new referrals for survivors of rape, sexual violence, abuse, harassment and exploitation. Less than 3% of these identified as having been abused in a domestic abuse setting. We work with survivors from the age of 5 years. Sexual violence can be lifelong. The impacts, which are well documented, include mental health issues, suicide attempts, self-injury, eating disorders, substance misuse, isolation, and relationship issues. In addition are the recurring themes of shame, self-blame, low self-esteem, unwanted pregnancies. I could go on. We offer advocacy services and long-term therapy, yet our staff are again at risk of redundancy and burnout because we can't replace any leavers. There is a lack of funding, and unlike the domestic abuse sector, there is no duty for any statutory authority to provide funding. I commend the motion to write to the Prime Minister and Home Secretary, but would point out that in real terms, the funding that Razak receives from the Ministry of Justice has decreased by 47% at a time when our referrals are rising. For the 12 months in 2022-23, we received just over £411,000. Of that, Worcestershire got 214,000. For a 20-month period running to the 31st of March 2025, the Ministry of Justice has only offered 366k, which is to serve the whole region. This represents a 47% decrease in current funding levels, and this funding stream primarily funds the counselling services and preventative activities across both counties. We have challenged the decision, but to no avail, and are now looking at significantly reducing service provision. Currently, we have 403 adults and 151 children and young people waiting for specialist counselling support alone. Given that 1 in 4 women will be raped in their lifetime, and that 1 in 6 children will be sexually abused before they are 16 years old, perhaps the council could also use their influence closer to home and lobby both city and county council to provide funding for survivors of rape and sexual violence. Whilst I applaud the council for taking a step to bring about the societal change that it will take to address these crimes, it is important to recognise both the crossovers and the differences in support needs for survivors of all forms of violence against women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes the end of the public participation. Anybody who would like to disappear at this point is free to go. And I've got Rihanna in my mind here. If there's anyone else who'd like to go, they're free to go. Thank you. Thank you, Rihanna. Okay. So we're turning on to the next item on the agenda, we have questions. And the first question is from Councillor Smith. If you'd like to ask your question.
Thank you. Can the chair of the Planning Committee update Council on what action is being taken by enforcement officers to ensure compliance with tidy land legislation to remedy the gaping hole in the face of St John's, the former nightclub cinema site, which has been empty and unused for many years, looking unsightly, ugly and derelict? What powers does the council have to ensure the site is developed in line with existing planning consents?
Councillor Lewin.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Smith for her question. As Chair of Planning Committee, I'd like to assure members that if they have a query like this, then I am available between council meetings if they would like to discuss it directly with me, particularly because this is such a big issue for a number of councillors in your ward. And also because the detail I'm going to give in the answer is quite complicated, I'm very willing to email it to you as well so you can see it in detail afterwards. Okay, so don't worry about taking notes. Okay, so this is about the site of the former Zigzag nightclub in St John's. It's on the council's Heritage at Risk register. And I understand that planning enforcement officers have been trying to work with the owner for a number of years. And as you know, it's a long time, since 2013. And I'm sure you know this, to ensure that it is kept secure and tidy with some degree of success. I share your concerns about the fact that the site is still vacant and hasn't been redeveloped to much needed housing. We have a number of sites across the city which are similar. We could do with more housing. The demolition of the former nightclub building has left a gap in the street frontage. This is visually very prominent. The council has been proactive in supporting planning applications on the site, and a recent application was approved earlier this year, but there's been no obvious signs of any start on site. So the council has PAS under section 215 of the Planning Act to ensure that the site is kept tidy. PAS under sections 94 and 95 of the Act to issue a termination of planning permission notice, which is sometimes referred to as a completion notice. A termination of planning permission notice has to be approved, however, by the Secretary of State. It removes planning permission if a development is not completed within a reasonable time period. It does not actually compel a site owner to complete a development, so in some circumstances it can also be counterproductive. I have been assured by officers that they will continue to work with the owner to try to bring about the commencement of the recently approved residential development on this site. They will work with the owner to support them throughout the construction phase to ensure that there are no planning hurdles to prevent the completion of the development. However, if there is no construction-related activity over the next few months, I will ask officers to seek specialist legal advice on formal planning enforcement action, including a termination of planning permission notice. I hope that will help.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you. It's taking far too long. St John's and Bedwardine traders and residents have been very patient, but patience must come to an end. The condition is having a serious and detrimental impact on the economic opportunities and potential of retail in St John's. Will she consider using her powers to compulsory purchase the site to ensure development can happen?
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I really do share your concerns. It is a blight on St John's. I totally agree. I'm assured by officers that they're doing everything they can, and I think some of the processes are slower than we would like, but we have got a dedicated team who will look into this for you. Thank you.
Can I also just add a little bit into this as well, that committee chairs are committee chairs. They don't make policy up on the hoof. So if you do ask a question that requires a committee to make a decision, then obviously they will obviously need to refer that back to their own committee for it to be discussed in that committee. So hopefully that's understood by everybody. Thank you. Okay, so the next question then is number 2. That is from Councillor Riaz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question is to Councillor Richard Udall, Chair of Licensing and Environmental Health, and it reads as such. I am hearing that there are out-of-district private hire drivers operating within the City of Worcester without local regulation. There are potential risks to passenger safety as well as to our licensed hackney carriage trade if the vehicle standards this council has set are not maintained. Is the Chair of Licensing and Environmental Health Committee aware of this problem? Could he comment on the impact of the deregulation of hackney carriage vehicles rules which the government introduced in 2015?
Councillor Udall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for Councillor Riaz for the question. The Deregulation Act of 2015 enabled private hire operators licensed by Worcester City Council to accept a booking and then subcontract it to another operator licensed by a different local authority. Whilst vehicles and drivers may not be licensed by Worcester City, this doesn't mean that they are operating without regulation. Officers regularly undertake enforcement exercises and scrutinise out-of-area vehicles and drivers to ensure they are operating legitimately and within the regulations. Sadly, the government's intention when implementing the Deregulation Act 2015 was to encourage free movement of trade across districts, which inevitably has led to the current situation. Sadly, although this has provided a free market, it has also harmed and undermined our own local taxi industry. It is alleged that some private hire operators from outside Worcester are also applying for hire, which would be illegal. Often the public don't realise the difference between private hire vehicles and taxis, which only adds to the confusion. The government's sole intention when deregulating was to assist the likes of Uber and others to trade freely throughout the UK. The very nature of taxiing is therefore changing and is going further and further away from vehicles sitting on the ranks. We need to adjust to these changes.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Udall, for that question. I mean, the question of enforcement is unfortunately at the pivotal one in all of this. You mentioned that recent enforcement exercise have taken place, but few and far between. I really do believe that more rigorous enforcement and more regular and consistent enforcement is absolutely needed to at least get a grip of the situation and at least get the value that Worcester City pay into WRS, get that value back from them. Will the chair then of the Licensing and Environmental Health Committee agree to an item being placed on future agenda of the committee to discuss the problem and to consider ways to tackle the issue of private hire vehicles from outside the city illegally applying for hire, and who to contact to request a change in regulation in order to increase the protection for the general public and our residents?
Thank you, Councillor Riaz and Mr. Mayor. The last time the Licensing Committee discussed these issues was way back in 2018. So we perhaps do need to refresh our knowledge about the changes and what has happened and the roles and responsibilities of the Licensing Committee. We do need to look again about how we enforce the rules, how we ensure compliance, and examine the changes in the industry to see what can be done to help licensed drivers to adapt to those changes. Mr. Mayor, I will speak to officers and representatives of the industry, the taxi trade, to see how best we can move forward and consider what further options could be considered by the Licensing Committee.
Thank you. Okay, next question is from Councillor Amos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is to Councillor Denham, the Joint Leader of the Council. In the light of the Council's new transport strategy, can you tell me what roads will be closed to vehicular traffic, what road space for vehicular traffic is to be removed from the network, and how many residents' parking spaces will be removed as a result of the strategy's proposals?
Councillor Denham.
Thank you for the question. The short answer is no. No, for two reasons. We are operating in a two-tier authority, and those questions relate to responsibility of the County Council, which I would have thought as a former cabinet member for highways, the councillor may have understood. The other reason is that we have only just, within the City Council, signed off the city centre transport strategy. So it was only published in July, I think. So it's the beginning of a process of looking how it may be implemented between organisations.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I thank Councillor Denham for her answer, and I'm relieved that County Council will come to the aid of the people of Worcester. But can you tell me how her party's endless war on motorists will benefit Worcester people commuting to work, doing their weekly shop, taking their children to social and activity events, attending doctors or hospital appointments, or elderly people simply getting out of the house to see friends and family? 85% use cars as their main form of transport. What are the alternatives that they can use?
I would dispute the premise of the question. I think it's something like 20% of the population don't have access to a motor vehicle. It is about choice, it is about enabling people to move around the city, and it's unfortunate that our public transport system and our bus services have become so reduced that they are barely functional.
Thank you. Okay, we're on now to question number 4, again from Councillor Amos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is to Councillor Bissett, the Joint Leader of the Council. In the light of the Council's recent transport strategy, can you tell me the intended locations of the new multi-storey car parks that are to ring the city's outskirts?
Councillor Bissett.
I'd like to thank Councillor Amos for his question and also say sorry that I wasn't here to answer your question at the previous meeting. Again, the short answer is no. And to elaborate on that answer, any work on new strategic car park locations must be undertaken in partnership between the city and county councils, as any such proposals will need to be carefully integrated into the highway network and take into consideration other planned changes that the county council may wish to make, such as road closures, changes in traffic direction and signalling. Locations of car parks will also be subject to the normal planning application process, and so at this point in time, no decision has been made with regard to the locations of any new car parks.
Do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Well, all I can say is thank goodness again we've got a county council to stop all this nonsense. But what evidence has she got that banning vehicles from the city centre, which is her objective after the elections in May 2024, will not destroy businesses in the high street, won't lead to the fantasy of a biking bonanza, and given the current deep reluctance of people to use the St Martin's Gate car park, what evidence has she got that shows people will actually use other multi-storey car parks, which will be even further away from the city centre?
Councillor Bissett.
Although we don't know the exact locations, the car parks will be carefully situated so that people will be able to walk from them into the city centre. We are not waging a war against motorists. I am myself a motorist, but we all have to recognise that we need to change our behaviour. Air quality is a major problem in this city, as we heard earlier in the week at a leaders' meeting. People are dying because of poor air quality in this city. So we need to get out of our cars. And obviously there must also be provision in the city centre for disabled drivers so that they can still get to where they need to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Question number 5 is from Councillor Petrosky.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question is directed to Councillor Rias, who chairs Communities Committee. In recognition of the role that faith communities play in the life of our city, would Chair of Communities Committee be happy to invite representatives of Worcestershire Interfaith Forum to discuss the possibility of adopting the faith covenant by this council?
Councillor Rias.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Petrosky, for your question. In short, we are always willing to consider initiatives that bring communities together and highlight our common ground. As you're well aware, Mr. Mayor, my mayoral theme of Love Not Hate was all about exactly that. And we saw All Faiths and United, where ministers of all major faiths issued a joint statement against the demonstrations of the EDL. It is important to realise that role that faith-based charities and organisations played during the pandemic also, and how they were vital resources and a significant cog where central government was missing and their intervention wasn't anywhere to be seen. But we also need to recognise we have a process and we have an excellent equality and diversities champion here in my colleague Robin Norquirk, who's leading the charge in including peoples and groups and organisations of all kinds. So it is in one part of me is thinking that actually that is the process to follow in terms of this. However, we need to understand the implications of the covenant that's being proposed and how it will work in practice and what it actually means for the citizens of Worcester. The Faith Covenant, as you know, is a joint commitment between faith communities and local authorities to a set of principles that guide engagement, aiming to remove some of the mistrust that exists and to promote open, practical working on all levels. And the concept was introduced in 2014 by an all-party parliamentary group on faith and society in collaboration with an organisation called Faith Action, who are a national network of faith-based and community organisations. The Faith Covenant also entails the following commitment from local authorities. Local authorities commit to welcome the involvement of faith groups in the delivery of services and social action on an equal basis with other groups. In addition, they commit to building relationships and trust with faith groups, adopting strategies for the engagement of faith communities in consultation exercises, and encouraging faith groups and their members to be involved in the reshaping and redesigning of local services, sharing training and learning opportunities between faith communities and the local authorities. Birmingham City Council, I believe, was the first council to sign up to this, and followed by 23 other councils between 2015 and 2023, the most local to us being Solihull and Wolverhampton. So in short, yes, we will consider, but there is, I think, a question to be had regarding the appropriate mechanism from which to bring this.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary question? Very good, thank you. Lovely, thank you. Okay, next question is number 6, and it's from Councillor Cleary.
Thanks, Chair. My question is to Councillor Denham, Labour Joint Leader of the Council. A constituent of mine recently took in her daughter and grandchildren when they left an abusive partner. She'll now join Worcester's 3,500 long housing list, but she fears a long wait in an overcrowded home. She asked me if I thought this was fair when hotels were being used for migrants. I said no, but other than that, I wasn't sure what else I could say to reassure her. How would you answer my constituent?
Councillor Denham.
Thank you. It's not really appropriate to give housing advice to an individual in this place, because the detail of that should be confidential in this setting and depends on their precise circumstances. So my advice to your constituent is that she should contact our housing team. Every individual household that contacts the council for advice surrounding their housing circumstances is assessed by the housing team to determine their immediate and long-term housing needs.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary question?
I do, yeah. And thanks for Councillor Denham for not answering the central tenet of my question, which is answering itself. The supplementary is, do you think my constituent sees herself as part of a city of sanctuary?
I haven't met your constituent. I have no idea what her views might be on a matter that we've yet to debate.
Thank you. Okay, we're now moving on to question number 7. Again from Councillor Cleary.
Chair, it's again to Councillor Denham, Labour Joint Leader. I've had several representations from allotment holders and site reps across the city about allotment services. There's a widely held feeling that when allotment services sat under the umbrella of the Communities Committee some years ago, the service was better and more community focused than it is now under the Environment Committee. You agree with me that the Council should consider repositioning allotment services back into communities?
Councillor Denham.
I don't know whether Councillor Cleary has a particular issue in mind. I'm not aware of it. Allotments do make a key contribution to our city and to our city green spaces. They're an important part of biodiversity in the city, the environmental agenda, and actually a significant contribution to health and well-being. And people enjoy their allotments, provide food, provide social content. Environment Committee oversaw a review of allotments during 2021. That resulted in the updating and refreshing of tenancy agreements, and that's now providing greater clarity and support for, in fact, over 900 plot holders in the city.
Do you have a supplementary question?
No, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Right, we'll move on now to the notice of motions. These are submitted in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 8. So the first motion is violence against women, proposed by Councillor Murray. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to Joy Griffiths for speaking in favour of this motion. I'm sure Council will agree with me that these organisations provide an essential service to people who suffer rape and sexual abuse. I do have a I do have a personal interest in this motion that I'm presenting. My best friend from school was murdered by her husband. Across the UK, harassment and violence against women and girls is widespread and has worsened due to measures taken in response to the pandemic, such as lockdown and disruptions to vital services. In the 12 months to March 2020, 81 women were killed in a domestic homicide. Ending violence against women starts when we change the story. Today, I'm asking Council to help to change the story by committing to making consistent choices and actions so that women can live their lives free from men's violence. Culture change does not happen overnight. We can end violence against women and girls by recognising what violence is and knowing how to challenge and disrupt harmful attitudes and behaviours that perpetuate gender-based violence. This includes all women. Trans women experience the same degree of harassment and violence. Some behaviours may seem harmless, but normalising them ignores the effects these have on women and can lead to more extreme violence. It's time for us all to raise the standard by refusing to excuse harmful behaviour and calling it out to create the change we need for a more equal and safe society for women and girls. It's time for us to change the story. My notice of motion is on the order paper. It calls on the Council to mandate the Managing Director to write to the Home Secretary and Prime Minister to demand an urgent royal commission into male violence against women and to declare misogyny as a hate crime. For public sexual harassment to be made a crime. To address the backlog in the courts to ensure victims get justice and rehabilitation of criminals begins sooner, and to increase investment in victims' services. In addition, for Council to resolve to encourage all councillors to take the White Ribbon Pledge as per the motion order, and for us all to work together to change the story. To continue to work towards White Ribbon accreditation, and as part of this to mark White Ribbon Day on the 25th of November each year and encourage participation amongst councillors, council staff and local schools. And to work with our partners in the LGBTQ community and Stop Hate UK to produce a transphobia hate crime awareness plan. I hope that members will vote in favour of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to the seconding of the motion. Councillor Jagan.
I would like to second this thank you, Mayor. I would like to second this motion, but if it's okay, I would like to speak at the end of the discussion, if that's possible.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so do we have any speakers on this motion? Okay, I had Pat Agar first. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's no real secret that I ran a women's centre for 8 years. I often worked with the police, domestic violence unit on a number of occasions over those years. They would send a plainclothes officer, usually a woman, with me when I was asked for help by a woman experiencing violence in her own home. There were a range of solutions. Sometimes we provided a safe, lockable room with a panic button. Sometimes a mobile phone that only the woman knew about would help. And the worst case scenario was to help a woman flee the home, perhaps to a refuge in another area. The perpetrators of domestic violence don't tend to stop. They have to be stopped. And that's sound sociological research I'm citing there. Abusers are controlling in a variety of ways, isolating their spouses or partners from friends and family, ensuring they also control their victims financially, so they cannot easily escape the violent situation. And those who are experiencing this kind of violence commonly take quite a long time to come forward and talk about their problem and ask for help. I knew one young woman who climbed out of the window as her father came in the door. She went back to rescue her younger sister a few days later. The police assisted them to leave the city and build a new life elsewhere. Worst of all, 1.5 women on average, well, obviously you can't have half a woman, this is an average, per week are still killed by their violent spouse or partner, and that has been a stubborn statistic which has been hard to shift. In addition, online misogyny and abuse is on the rise, and even girls of school age are experiencing significant misogyny. I would hope that the Communities Committee would look at this motion carefully and see how we can take it to the heart of our policy and practice as a council. Thank you.
Thank you. A number of hands went up and I may have missed some of them. So I've got, next one I've got is Councillor Petrosky.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to declare my support for this motion and gratitude for Councillor Murray to put it in front of us today. And one of the reasons why I think it's really important is the current state of affairs when it comes to persecuting sexual violence. I have a privilege and great honour of representing this council and the Police and Crime Panel. And we were looking at the recent report from the Police and Crime Commissioner, which stated, among other things, that the force has taken action against just 11% of all rape offences in Q1 in this current year. It's a snapshot, but I suppose what I'm trying to say is that this should be prioritised. Another statistic, 2.1% of 934 rape investigations conducted by West Mercia Police in 2021, we have statistics, full statistics for that year, not the last year, led to a charge or summons, 2.1%. That's reprehensible, I think, in my view, and I hope that all my colleagues will share this view. What I would also like to say is extend my thank you to Ms. Griffiths for speaking publicly and taking time to join us here today. And if it's okay with you, I'll be really interested to see how this council, myself as a somebody who represents on the council and the Police and Crime Panel, can try and lobby for more support directed towards the victims of sexual crimes and offences. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got three more on my list. I've got Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Cooper and Councillor Udall. Okay. So first of all, Councillor Hodgson.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, yes, and thank you very much for this motion. I'm afraid I cannot fully support it because I do have one or two reservations about the wording of it, but I will explain why I will do that. Firstly, I would say regarding the action point, Worcester City Council already supports White Ribbon Day within the Veld Held at a community centre. Many agencies and charities have stalls, and this event has been running in Worcester for several years. As Mayor, I attended the White Ribbon launch in 2021, and certainly that was one of the events I did. So, one thing that the motion is resolving, we're already actually dealing with. Also, the motion does not give recognition to the many charities in our city, including the Dawn Project, which has been supported by the council, including the Hot Market charity. Another charity that had the privilege to visit as mayor with the opening of the Seven Angels Housing and Support Association. I met Svisri Monwawi, excuse me if I can't quite pronounce her name, because she came over from Zimbabwe where she suffered domestic abuse, and she set up her own successful business and gave back to the community by creating this wonderful charity and these fantastic homes that are actually available for those. So again, I wish the motion was just more local and just to address the good things that are happening in this particular city. But really, as a Conservative, I must say I cannot accept a motion that says sustained cuts to all elements of the justice system. It's just an incorrect and unfortunately lazy argument, which unfortunately good opponents of my party and government seem to like using. There have actually been more resources put into victim support, including increase in the number of independent sexual and domestic violence advisors, or SVAs and DVAs, that provide ring-fence funding from 700 to 1,000 of these, which we've seen an increase in the funding for victim support services to £185 million by 2024-25. Victims advocates, SVAs and DVAs and all other kinds of advocates have a crucial role to play in helping vulnerable victims to support, cope, recover and engage with the criminal justice system. Extra slots in the court processing plans have also been made, although admittedly there is a backlog, and a lot of this is due to COVID, which we are still trying to recover from. What I'd say as a council, we do have, our committee system, perhaps the health and wellbeing could look at this as well as potentially the community and look at, say, how some of these points that have actually been raised in this motion. I mean, I do have personal experience of abuse at home. My mother was abused when I was a child, and at the age of 10, my parents divorced, and we left home, and we had to we relocated somewhere else. So I do know what it is like in that family situation, going through in that. But I'm afraid because this motion is so long and does have things that I can't fully agree, I'm afraid I can't vote for the motion, but I do sympathise with the points you're actually trying to raise. And I hope we do recognise the good work of charities in this city in terms of helping domestic violence.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor. In 2021, I co-led with Lisa Taylor, Reclaim the Night March, which marched through the streets of Worcester against violence, women and girls. And we had about 400 participants. The energy on that march was just amazing. And afterwards, we listened to stories of survivors of abuse and harassment and rape. And those stories will stay with me. I am absolutely happy to support this motion. Thank you for bringing it. And I think the residents of Worcester would be happy that we would support this motion. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Udall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This motion gives me an opportunity to raise an issue which I've raised elsewhere at County Hall. And I do so because the issue is not mentioned in the motion itself. It's crimes against sex workers. We have a growing number of sex workers in Worcester, women selling sex to feed or heat their families. Too often women in the sex industry are treated as perpetrators of crime and not victims of crime, making them incredibly reluctant to report violent or aggressive customers. Nationally, an organisation called National Ugly Mugs has been established to help sex workers to identify violent customers, but its operation technically is illegal. The law prevents women from working safely. Enforcement agencies, including the police and the City Council, need to reconsider their responses to such issues. We need reform and change to protect women working in this industry, and I hope the movers of this motion will agree that it would be an enormous step forward to help protect women who are very vulnerable and on the front line.
Are you seeking an amendment? Or... Okay. I've got Councillor Stanley.
Mr. Mayor, thanks very much. I mean, for the purposes of the tape, so to speak, I think we all should put it on the record that I am totally opposed to, I find domestic abuse or any form of abuse utterly abhorrent. I do, however, have some considerable concerns about this particular motion, and the reasons are these. The motion concentrates primarily on national issues. There's a remarkable absence of comment about some incredible work that takes place in the city, but more of that in a moment. But to be clear, there is an enormous amount of work still to be done to change misogynistic and sexist behaviour, agreed. However, it would be a mistake to suggest that progress has not been made. I'm certainly old enough to know when misogynistic and sexist behaviour was a crude and was part of it, virtually everyone's daily life. And we've moved on an enormous amount since those days, and I'm delighted that that is the case. In terms of, the mention is made of the government, so I think it's necessary to sort of push back here. A cursory glance at what, in this case, is the House of Lords, the library, demonstrates what the government has been doing in recent years to give support to victims of domestic abuse. To name just one example, the Domestic Abuse Act 2021 is a primary example where new offences, new powers to the police are all designed to make punishment more effective and send a clear signal that abuse will not be tolerated. There are, however, local initiatives that we need to be conscious of. My colleague, Stephen Hodgson, has rightly brought those to the attention of Council this evening. I find, surprisingly, no mention of these within the motion we have before us. I, and I'm sure many other people in this room, are totally supportive of the Dawn Project. I've given money, and I'm sure others have, from various funds that are available to us, and I will continue to do so. I find that absence slightly puzzling, I have to say. When we are talking about funding, there is one statistic that needs to be on record, and that is this, that in May 2023, the government announced that funding was quadrupling for victims and witness support services by 2024-25, up from £41 million in 2009-2010. I think those are significant sums. Could we do better? Were we living in a completely different context? Of course we could. But those figures do need to be placed on record. What I would urge the mover of the motion to do is what colleagues around the room have already suggested should be done, which is to take ideas to the chairs and vice chairs of communities and health and wellbeing, and work through some really serious proposals that I'm sure she and others will find a receptive audience for, on all sides of the chamber. So, with regret, I can't support the motion, but I have to say, all of us in this room are utterly, totally hold any perpetrators of domestic violence completely in contempt. Thank you.
Do we have any other speakers? No. Jesse, would you like to do you're speaking on the subject?
So thank you very much for everybody who's spoken in support, and I acknowledge the points that have been made about the shape of the motion and appreciate the support for the broad idea of it. I just want to add a few points about this motion is not so much about the actual strategies that are doing, but also about keeping the conversation going on these issues, because this is an ongoing challenge for society. And it is often easy to think about violence against women as something that happens in a dingy club or a poorly lit alleyway or late at night. And it is often easy to think about a hooded predator waiting for her as she goes about her business. And while it's important to acknowledge that, male victims are often the most common victims of homicide, it is often really important to think about how violence against women is often perpetrated by somebody that she knows and that she trusts. And as shocking as this story is, we need to approach that issue not just from a policing or a strategy or budgets or spending money on the issue, but also talking about it as a cultural problem, constantly discussing the possibility that a woman might be in a difficult situation, and it's not just for the police or CCTV cameras, but perhaps a trusted friend, creating an environment where she feels that she can raise her issues, speak her truth without any worries about reprisals or worries about not being believed or not being taken seriously. So when you think about this motion, it's about the message that we send about this issue. And we acknowledge that there is a lot of work that has been done, and no one is suggesting that the council is blind to the issue, but it's about keeping the conversation going.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to ask Councillor Murray to sum up then, if you'd like to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. During my preparation for presenting this motion this evening, I did become aware of Councillor Hodgson's support of the White Ribbon campaign when I watched the meeting from 2021, and you said you were wearing your white ribbon and you encouraged everybody else to do so. I commend that, thank you. We do acknowledge that there is a lot of work going on in Worcestershire, and I'm sorry that I did not mention that in the motion, but I know it is taking place. But we are raising this motion to acknowledge how important it is that we keep the issue at the forefront of public discussion. An issue of this importance makes its action more prominent, so everyone is aware of what's going on and the impact. I'm happy to take any ideas to the Health and Wellbeing Committee, but for the time being, I do hope that people can support this motion this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I think at this point we'll move to the vote. All those in favour of this motion, please put your hand up. All those against? Any abstentions? No. Okay, that motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you for bringing the motion. Okay, next motion is to be proposed by Councillor Hodgson. It's motion number 2. Oh, Councillor Cookson. Can someone get?
Here she is. Thank you. I'll just find it on the old paper. Okay. This.
Might as well wait for Zoe to come in. Come on, Zoe.
Okay. This motion deals with one very, very simple aim. Back in April, the new parking charges came into effect. And one of the regrettable aspects of that was the 30-minute parking tariff was removed, which was actually very, very popular. And it was very useful for people who have errands, short errands in the city, who actually, found that quite cost effective and enabled them to actually do it. Suddenly, some of the car parks became far more expensive to use, notably the ones in the green sector, where we went straight from a 30-minute one to a minimum of 2 hours. And the consequence for that, it went up from 60 pence to £1.50 to do that sort of parking, even though you might not necessarily need all that particular time. What this motion is seeking to do is to quite simply reintroduce that. We're not asking to reverse the increased parking charges, although my group feel that was a mistake, and that's why we voted against the budget in February. We just think we are giving you an opportunity, and I know the newspaper picked up on this the other day about the actual importance of the motion. I think it's also important as well, because especially some of our car parks, like the green ones I mentioned in Tallow Hill, they also have parking payments that are Ringo only. And the Ringo system is actually, if it was a taxation system, would be quite regressive because it's a fixed price. So if you're paying for all day parking, you pay the same Ringo fee as you do if you're just having a short stay. So I think, it's all the more imperative that we have competitive 30-minute rates at these particular car parks. And actually, we might actually get more revenue through this because, for example, a half-hour fee doesn't have to be half of an hourly fee. It could be 60–70% of the hourly fee. And actually what you might find is when you get more people using the bay, we actually get more revenue. So it's actually not going to cost us as a city council anything. But if we do pass this motion tonight, it will go to the P&R committee, where then we can have officer suggestion about what the rate should be and how this is actually implemented. And I think if we do that tonight, I think a lot of people will be very, very grateful that we did the right thing, we thought about it again, and we reintroduced the 30-minute tariff.
Thank you. Now to be seconded by Councillor Stanley.
Mr. Mayor, happy to second the motion, and with your permission, I'll speak at the end of the.
Thank you. Do I have any speakers to raise anything on this? Councillor Alcott.
Mayor, thank you. I think, you know, life is busy and council is busy, and there are many big issues to deal with, including cost of living and the NHS. And I appreciate we are only the city council, but I think this is perhaps maybe a slightly political and retrograde step. I think if people come into the city for half an hour, they're less likely to spend as much money as if they came for an hour or further anyway. And I think what we've learned with the car parks is whilst we have increased the charges, it hasn't decreased usage. People who want to come in and park still come in and park. This council is short on revenue. So I'm sorry, I can't support the motion.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Bissett and then Councillor Pingree.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. During the extensive preparatory work that was undertaken by officers back in the spring around car parking charges, there were comparisons made between what was happening in Worcester and what was happening in car parks in other cities. And we found that actually very few other cities offer a 30-minute short stay. And that did inform our decision. We only made this change less than 6 months ago. I think it's far too early to consider it, but in fact, I am opposed to this motion. I could not support it. I don't think there is good evidence that it was that popular. In fact, on the contrary, there's evidence in papers provided to us at the time that not many 30-minute car parking stays were occurring. And what evidence also do we have that people were exasperated? We need to save money, which was one of the reasons why we made the car parking charges. And car parking charges hadn't gone up for 14 years, whereas other methods of getting into the city, such as by bus, have become more and more expensive. So I cannot support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Pingree.
Thank you. I also can't support this motion because I think that having a 1 hour parking fee encourages people to stay longer in Worcester, and our businesses benefit from that. There are also many places in Worcester you can park for 45 minutes on the road for free. So if they would like to do that, they can.
Any other speakers? No? Okay. Councillor Hodgson, if you'd like to sum up.
Yes, certainly. Unfortunately, the reality is, if you don't have a short stay tariff, people may not come into the city at all, and that appears to be what is actually happening. If people want to come for more than an hour, they will come for more than an hour because they've got a reason to come for more than an hour. The 30-minute short stay, I think, was very, very good. It's been around for a number of years, and saying this is premature to actually reintroduce. I did actually originally want to put it at our previous council meeting, but I was told I couldn't put the motion in because it was outside the 6-month deadline between when a council decision is made and when you can put a motion in that basically reverts it or partly does. So now is the time we can actually put it in. Going to car parks themselves, I mean, Tallow Hill has an incredibly low utilisation out on our next door website. There's been quite a few comments about that, and I think that the combination of the fact it's difficulty to pay with this Ringo restriction, which is something we need to look at, but that's for another day. But also this minimum 2 hours stay, the car park is no longer becoming attractive for actually people to use. And I think one other thing we need to remember as well is Worcester City Council isn't the only provider of car parking in the city. We have NCP, we have Crown Gate, and we have the Asda one. So we aren't the only provider. But I think I would like to see people in Worcester being encouraged to use our car parks because they're safe, they're competitively priced. Because unlike other car parks, if people use our car parks, they're paying to help support the city services that we so much value.
Thank you. Apologies to Councillor Stanley. I should have given you a chance to speak. So would you like to say something now?
Mayor, Councillor Hodgson has...
Thank you. So I think on that note, we'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. All those against? Any abstentions? Okay, that motion is not carried forward. Thank you. Next motion is closure of railway offices, ticket offices. Councillor Amos.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, this motion is not about nationalisation. It's not about the trade unions. It's not about party politics. Rather, this motion is about passenger choice and value for money for the up to 20% of passengers who choose to buy their ticket and obtain other services from a person at a ticket office. It is an extraordinary move by the train operating companies, since they haven't even been trying to defend it by pointing to some or any benefit that passengers would experience as a result of the closures, because there aren't any benefits at all to any passengers. Rather, it is a bizarre attack on their customers, nothing more than simply a cost-cutting move that will solely and exclusively benefit their shareholders. Whilst I don't have any problem with companies making a profit, far from it, in this case, since taxpayers are funding the railways to the tune of billions of pounds every year, they do have a...
Just knock off the AV.